Hi, I'm here with Brittany O'Rourke, and she is interviewing me. I have no idea what her questions are and what this is about. So go ahead, have a seat, and shoot, what's your first question?
Well, the first one is we're just getting into early background. And so, where were you born? How did you and your family end up where you're living? And how did you get to be where you're living now?
Whoa, that's huge. Okay. Well, I was born in Manitoba and in St. Boniface Hospital. And where my family was, my mother was a Russian Mennonite. I didn't live with her very much. My father's peoples were originally from Saskatchewan, then down to Turtle Mountain, then back up to Saskatchewan. Then my father came across from Saskatchewan into Manitoba, and he met my mother in Manitoba, and that's where I was born. I lived there for maybe 14 years. I was part of the welfare system. Part of the 60 scoop. So I didn't always live with my family. Then, as all good cowgirls go, I left and went to Texas, of all places, and never really lived with family after that, and just lived in many, 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 many places, and never back in Manitoba.
And what was it like growing up?
What was it growing up like?
Yeah.
It was a huge responsibility. It was extremely difficult. Like any child, aging out of care was really, really difficult. Being able to even survive in care was really, really difficult. So my childhood was a lot about survival. A lot about I was homeless and hungry, and also had my siblings to really consider and take care of. So I was a very, very busy child. And I think because I had so much on my plate in terms of taking care of siblings and worrying for them, it was a bit of an adventure because I was so busy, and I don't know if I wouldn't say I really had much of a childhood, but I had a great adult childhood. As an adult child. I mean, I was a child that was doing adult things, and there was a lot of adventure involved in that, and a lot of worry, and a lot of stress, and I had a lot of PTSD, and stays in mental institutes, and all fairly typical things that happen, but really learned a lot about health, especially being in a mental institute so young. I could see all the things that weren't working. And by the time I was 17, I wanted to change all of psychology and all the ways in which children and people were being treated for post-traumatic stress, because there was just nothing in the field at that time about PTSD. There was nothing in the field 60 years ago. I'm 68 now, so there was nothing in the field that was really helpful to Indigenous peoples. There was nothing there it was more damaging than helpful. And I somehow had the ability to see that, and sort of wanted to rework it for people. And so I was really dedicated to mental health and dedicated to children having a better outcome when it comes to complex trauma and genocide-informed practices. And so my childhood was an eye-opener. It opened my heart and my eyes, and it moved me into justice and compassion, and for some reason I seemed to squeak through all the cracks of everything. Like, being the daughter of a pedophile, you think that would ruin me. It didn't break me, it just made me stronger. Like, I was not going to see this happening for other kids in the country. And so my childhood was a huge motivator and an inspiration to me in some ways, which is not always the outcome for most people coming from those kinds of tragedies, but for me it was something else.
That was kind of going into my next question about what kind of schooling did you have, and what options were available for you as you moved through your life. And
Schooling was complex because there really was nothing in that area at that time on complex trauma, right? So often I would, you could not learn. I mean, you could not. There was nothing available on the subject even of post-traumatic stress for genocide and foreign practices. I mean, those words weren't even there at that time for children, Indigenous peoples coming out of care and what. So the first order of business was money. So my first education was, believe it or not, in engineering. I wanted to be making at least as much money as any man was making because I had a lot of kids to support, my family. And so I went into to be an electrician at first, and then became an engineering manager. I worked in engineering for a long time. At the same time, I was working on post-traumatic stress and studying a lot on psychology, and met up with Jean Genlin, and in the, I think it was late 70s or 80s. So I always had two streams. One, my heart pulled towards decolonizing psychotherapy for genocide and foreign practices, which was my dedicated, the most of what I was up to, but there's no money in that. So, and I needed to be able to fund a family, and poverty and homelessness was out of the question for me. I grew up with that. I was not going to allow that in my life as an adult. So engineering was also a wonderful option. So I was maybe the first woman after the Second World War to be working in telecommunications, and I mean there were posters of me in my tool belt, right? But that wasn't where my passion lay. That's where, although I loved that, I especially wanted to see something shift in the country for children experiencing complex trauma, and for Indigenous peoples, for them to get back to what they knew about health, because we know a lot about health when it comes to culture and land and land-based practices. It's just that was not in any of the healthcare. Just wasn't part of everything in the Western model of psychotherapy. Was really modeled on a narcissistic model. I, me, my feelings, my this, my that. There was no collective attachment to an interconnected world or universe. So somebody had to bring that back into psychotherapy, and it didn't exist. I mean, it existed forever, but it wasn't part of the healing practices of psychotherapy. So that really motivated me to bring back what we knew about land-based practices into the psychotherapy, because it saves lives. I know the only reason I was alive was because there were no adults in my world that cared about me, and I'm saying that authentically, not because there were no adults that cared about me as a child. But there always was the land, there was the sun, there was the grass. Anytime I felt suicidal, and I did a lot, and I attempted suicide many times, but I always found myself back by the water, or back in that wheat field, or back in the land is what kept taking care of me. And those interconnected knowing spaces, the land was looking after me, the animals were looking after me. Adults weren't. People weren't. There weren't, and I remember a psychiatrist once saying to me, well, someone must have loved you. And the fact was, yeah, the earth did. It wasn't a person. My siblings loved me, too, and needed me. So those were also strong ties. So there were ancestral ties, but mostly I was raised by the land. Mostly what helped me through were the roots of a tree. I remember one time I was trying to escape living with a pedophile, my father, and I put this little plant by the window, and I kept water. It was dead. There was nothing in it. There was nothing in this other than mud in an old pot. And I put that pot in a basement window, and I kept, because we were locked in the basement for years, literally, I would put water in this crazy little thing, and that silly little thing sprouted. And the deal I had with the plant was that if you grow for me, then I will leave this place. And I escaped through the window, and I never went back from a very torturous life, right? It's like the plants, my relationship with land was my savior. And I think that there was harm done, but it was not, the harm was turned into justice and into social action.
Thank you. The next question is, what decisions have you made about love, marriage, children, sexuality, and what are your choices and experiences about motherhood, reproduction, and birth control, and abortion?
That's really cool question. Oh, pretty loaded there, woman. Well, I've never felt like I was, I've always felt pretty fluid, depending who, I never felt like I would put a label on myself as heterosexual or bisexual or gay or whatever. I just always felt that it depended on the relationship I was in and the person I was with, and that my body would respond to the body I was with, if that's the body I want to be with, right? And so those labels just, they mean nothing to me personally.
Yeah.
And I always have had strong feelings. Though I'm not into rules and things like that. So, but I did have strong feelings about marriage. In the sense, I never really believed much in marriage, but I did know that by being married, it helped it make it a little harder for me to leave. Mm-hmm. I only had really good marriages because I would only be with people who were good partners, in the sense that they were not oppressive. I could come and go as I pleased. I didn't have any defined role. And as you know, I'm actually 80% on the road this year and last year. So my partner has got to be able to handle that, right? I can't be with somebody who would restrict me or oppress me in any way. At the same time, I like to be tethered, because I go easily. Like if I'm, it's easy for me to say, this is too much work, I'm off. I've got other things I'm so busy with, right? And so my current husband and I had a very good laugh, because we've been together for 25 years, a long time. But anytime we wanted to be apart, we'd be apart like for 2 years at a time before we talk to each other again, because it's just, we're hard to tether. He's a bachelor, I'm a bachelor. We're both bachelors, right? So we actually got married, which is hilarious, because neither of us are really marriageable. And we like being married, because it does tether us in some strange, bizarre way, right? But I feel that my first husband was a beautiful, beautiful man, and we made our beautiful son together. And so, and we were like two torture survivors, because he was also a torture survivor. And we were just so kind and so good to each other, because we've both been through so much. And that was a really good marriage for 13 years. It was sweet. And then something else happened, right? Then he fell in love with one of my friends, one of my good friends. It was time for us to separate, because we were just like two people healing together. And the passionate thing wasn't there. And then I met, my current husband. I mean, there were other relationships in between there, but it was a fiery thing. It was completely the opposite. It was like damage control, right? A fiery thing that you really needed to tether, or it was going to blow apart. So, so he does his thing, I do mine. My son, I loved being a single parent. I thought that was the best thing that could ever happen for me, because he lived half time with his father and half time with me. He had and and I was a very busy woman, and so the having him half-time was perfect for me, and I knew he was always safe with his wonderful father. So, and his father had other children, so I knew that his father could bring siblings to my son, and his father's children are like my godchildren. Like, it's just so lovely that there are these other children there. But I had raised enough children as a child. I couldn't do more that as a woman. Plus, I was told I couldn't have children because of the physiological damage of being the daughter of a pedophile. So when Jeffrey came, it was a miracle. He was like a miracle human being. To me, he's my everything, as are my grandchildren. So I loved being a mom. I loved every moment. I still love being a mom. And I love being a kokum, right? It's just delicious. And I feel so blessed that I was able to pump one little person out. I got one, yay! Which I was shocked at because I hadn't anticipated it. But, and I think single motherhood rocks if there's another person doing half the job. It's amazing. So, great. Love being a mom.
Awesome. So, oh yes, we answered that one. Do you have any thoughts about, in today's society, about birth control and abortion and the options available?
Well, as an Indigenous woman, and when you look at the collective, you look at things collectively, it's a very hard question for me because I don't believe in abortion.
Yeah.
But I absolutely 100% believe in the right to abortions,
Yeah.
right? And so my reason about struggling with abortion is because of genocide. I feel that so many babies were taken, so many children were lost, like 40% of the kids, more than that, during the Indian residential schools, and even more than that during the epidemics, that every single child born, whether the child is born wanted or not wanted, or it's a celebration. Like, it's just, oh my God, we got so many numbers to put back.
Yeah.
So that answer for me is a deep genocide response. Like, to every, there is no child, there is no baby born that shouldn't be here. At the same time, right to choose is really important. It's so I personally want every single Indigenous child to be born.
Thank you.
And for those numbers to be put back, and they are being put back. We're the largest, fastest growing demographic out of any peoples in Canada. So it's happening. We just have to keep pumping out those babies. Isn't that just? I know it's a disturbing response.
No, I really appreciate you answering that question. Thank you. The next one is, does the world seem different for young women now than when you were young in your youth?
Oh, this is so heartbreaking.
I know. And in what ways and with what consequences?
It's almost like there's what would you call it? A pretend things are better, glow discussion. We have to all say that things are getting better, because somehow the culture kind of demands that, but I don't agree. I think things are not good. I feel like that this right-wing swing right now, the rise in racism, the trafficking of children. I don't believe aging out is so hard, and I know we keep trying to make things better, and we are trying, and I keep trying. We all do, right? But I can't put that nice thing on there and say things are better, because I just saw a ham for $176,
I saw that.
right?
Yeah.
For in Nunavut.
Yeah.
My biggest problem as a child was starvation and homelessness. Child sexual abuse was right up there too, but starvation and homelessness was every second, not knowing where you're going to be, how you're going to sleep, where you're going to, it's just, those things have not changed. Poverty is still bad for kids in Canada, and really bad for Indigenous kids, and we have a lot of murdered and missing women. We have a lot. I get scared for my little grandchildren who are biracial, and they look almost more Muslim, or they look more East. I don't know. You can't tell what nationality they are, right?
Yeah.
And because because of the mixture of a black mother, a half-breed father, right? These kids look like they could be from the Middle East, and that they could be killed any time. in the United States, where they have family in Texas. Things scare me for this world right now, not just, and for my own little grandsons. It's a scary time, because they're so able to say how they are, and move their bodies around so freely, except if they do that in the States, they could be shot or killed, right? So no, I don't think things are better at all, and I think we keep pretending they're better because we're supposed to culturally say that, because we're supposed to be more sophisticated, more knowledgeable, more learned, more all these things. But even with all that learnedness, so many people fall through the cracks and are hungry and homeless, and their bodies are threatened if they are of another, if they're biracial, or their racism is really rampant right now.
That's true. Yeah. What do you think about feminism?
What do I think about feminism? I feel like, as an Indigenous woman, we just have to get back to what we know about women, and women's strength, and their resiliency, and their knowledge. I guess I sometimes struggle with feminism from a Western culture. I remember when I was trying to make To a Safer Place, a film on child sexual abuse, and I was looking at the feminist movement, and they were so concerned about things that were important, like Barbie dolls and ads, and they're important, right? But they were so privileged. The feminism was so privileged. It didn't really take into account the intersectionalities. It didn't take in oppression of Indigenous women, or the murder, the trafficking of all brown kids, or the fact that we have people in cages right now at the border in the United States. Families are being torn apart. So I was a little bit at war with feminism, because it didn't address the issues that were really, really important: the oppression of Indigenous peoples, the starvation, the genocide. Wouldn't even say the word genocide, and still doesn't, right? So it seemed that their priorities were privileged priorities in comparison to what my life experience was, or the peoples that I was sitting with on a day-to-day basis. And at the same time, I would always call myself a feminist, right? Mm-hmm. But it's complicated.
Yeah. What does it mean for you to be a girl, and did you ever think about what it would be like to be a boy?
Yeah, I used to wear army boots and think of myself as a boy and take traditionally male jobs, and I always felt that women were treated like mud and girls were treated like mud, and that I reeled against the oppression, but I never wanted to be a man, I love being a woman. I just felt the oppression of patriarchy. So the question is, would I have liked to have been a man? No, I would not like. I feel sometimes that they are, that they have serious problems that women don't have with their empathy circuits, and patriarchy has really done a number on them. And that I always think the colonized mind and the colonized person is in way worse shape than the decolonized or the people that were oppressed. I always see oppressed people as being superior to non-oppressed people, because they're the oppressed people, the oppressing people haven't even begun to look at what their intergenerational motivations for the horrors that they do. I just think I would hate to be in their shoes because they're such a mess. Whereas the daughter of a pedophile, I could get better. I have so much room for health, right? And they haven't even begun. They don't even know that they're fucked up completely. Intergenerationally fucked up. It's their peoples that did that, and they haven't even looked at that. Where we who've been oppressed have been looking at it for a long time. We know a lot. So as an oppressed woman, I know a lot. And no, I wouldn't want to be a patriarchal man, ever. And I wouldn't want to be a white woman either. Even though my skin is white, I wouldn't want to be a white woman. I love being Indigenous.
Thank you. What do you think about your accomplishments that you've had so far, or ones that you are still possibly reaching towards?
Okay, well, I never try to reach towards anything, and I really don't feel accomplished. I just feel, and I know that a lot of change happened in this country that I've been part of. But when I say been part of, I really mean that deeply, because for some reason I have the ability to witness and to relay, right? And so I have witnessed and sat with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of oppressed peoples, Indigenous peoples, survivors of genocide, and I've been able to learn from that and be able to relay what might be helpful about that, which has caused a lot of change across the country. But just remember, that's not me, that's them. That's hundreds of voices that come through me. I am just a little pawn in the world of social change. And I know I'm Shirley Turcotte, and I have that big name, and everybody values me, and sometimes I'm called a national treasure. But to tell you the truth, I am just a wire from, it's not even me. I'm just something that all comes through. And I'm totally aware of that. So when people say, what about your legacy, Shirley Turcotte? I say, it isn't my legacy. It's the voices of the people, it's the voices of the connection. It's the interconnectedness that's speaking here. I'm just a conduit. I know that in a profoundly deep way, that it's not about me and my accomplishments. It's about the voices that come through. I'm really insignificant, and I sincerely mean that.
That was the next question is, what is your job, and has it ever felt like a job to you?
Yeah, I believe that, I started trying to put back all the damage my pedophile father did. Like, there's a lot to account for about the numbers of people. Like, he was a raving pedophile. There are a lot of kids involved. That had to be set straight. And so as the daughter, I need to set straight those things that were set so off course, right? So I don't think there was a day in my life I wasn't working towards setting things straight. I always could see things had to be made fixed in a way. Well, you can't fix it. So, never was a job. It was always a calling, and then and a pleasure. And I never worked at it. It just always. I mean, I work hard there. I have to say, I'm a very hard-working woman. That's true. So I do work at it, but at the same time, it's not. It's like a river. It's not like a. It's just you just. And I'm really blessed because I never really cared about what people think, and I never really. It didn't matter to me. I don't mind being sloppy, messy. Doing the best I can, and because I'm cyberbullied all the time, and people have tried to kill me, and I'm constantly under siege, so to speak. Those things don't bother me at all. I mean, there are times it bothers me because you can be afraid sometimes, especially if they say they're going to hurt your grandchildren. There are times I've been frightened. But in the bigger picture, it's like, I don't care about what people think. I don't care. It's just how it is. It's a way of being. I guess that's what it is. I think I'm a way of being. I don't think I do a job. I think I'm a way of being. For sure. That would make sense to me. I'm a way of being. And I always was that way of being. And it came out of, feeling responsible for the horrors that my family were part of, right? And wanting to set things straight. But what a wonderful way of being. So it's been a good life for me.
Did you have any empowering women or mentors in your life? And also, this is one of the last questions. If you have a favorite book, writer, movie, or favorite kind of music, what is that?
Everything for me is so ancestral and land-based that I can't say that there's a person. But what I would say is the peoples that have sustained me are probably the IFOT teams, the people that I work with. They are inspirational. The communities are inspirational. A woman died a few weeks ago in a tree, and she hung herself in a tree, and the kids there made medicine bags for the tree, and for all that were concerned. If you ask me who do I think is inspiring, it would be the communities and the people in the communities. So it's not, there isn't a, I loved, the book A Woman's Room. I really liked that book but no, that's not it. What it is for me, it's the experience of being in communities, in so many Canadian and American so many communities, and watching communities heal and move back to land-based practices, and watching them do that is so inspiring. I'm inspired by the stories from the land, so not from books and not from particular people, but from the stories from the land itself and from the communities themselves. It feeds my soul like nothing else, and the IFOT teams, the teams of instructors that just go. It's hard work we do, and we move towards genocide, not away from it, and with joy and dance and love and song and the stories of the land, and it's not movies and books for me. It's the people themselves. The people themselves that are always educating me. Awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.